What's up, everybody? Thank you so much for listening to Your Ex-Drinking Buddy. My name is Brennan Tassif. I'll be your host. Subscribe, rate, and review wherever you get your podcast. Check out the merch store at brennantcomedy.com/merch-store. And make sure you subscribe on YouTube as well. We'll put the shorts up there, the full video, the whole thing. Thank you so much for listening. I love it. I hope you love it. Subscribe on Patreon, too. We do bonus episodes. I do Tales from the Restaurant, where I talk about celebrities I've waited on and whether they're assholes or not, which is super fun. Also, we do a pre-show banter for my other show, Cheers from the Press Box with Joe Dorville. A lot of behind-the-scenes stuff going on over there, too. Make sure you just subscribe everywhere, just all over the place. I greatly appreciate it. And if you're not leaving the mean comments, thank you for that. Maybe leave a couple nice ones.
Grab me your beer and grab him a coke. We bout to sit for an hour, bullshit and tell jokes. And please don't mix it up, cause he done sobered up. Brennan T Comedy on your social media feeds. And Brennan Tassif is your ex-drinking buddy. Brennan Tassif is your ex-drinking buddy. Brennan Tassif is your ex-drinking buddy. Brennan Tassif is your ex-drinking buddy.
What is up, everybody? Welcome into another edition of Brennan Tassif is your ex-drinking buddy. I'm your host, Brennan Tassif. If you're new to the program, quick rundown on the show. I used to be everyone's favorite drinking buddy. It was my favorite thing to do, hang out with friends, get drunk, do drugs, get in all sorts of trouble, and then reminisce about those crazy stories. I am sober now, but it's still one of my favorite things to do, hang out with somebody, reminisce about the crazy old days. Most weeks I will be joined by a guest. This week is no exception. All the way from New York City, Paul Saylor. What's up, dude?
Dude, nothing. I'm here. I'm hanging out with my regular buddy.
Yeah,
Brennan
just a
Tassif,
regular old...
Yeah, I'm excited.
Shithead buddy.
I'm excited to ramble. I'm excited to turn the brags of our 20s into the confessions of our 30s.
That's such a good line. That's going to be the title.
That was what kept popping into my head as I was kind of thinking back through some of these stories, and all of which I've told in different contexts. But usually in let me tell you about this amazing thing that happened. And now it's like, let me tell you about how I was out of control and had problems. And
well, it is. It's such an interesting thing with the show because the listeners know this, and I think I've mentioned this to you before, but the whole premise of the show was I would tell people about my drinking stories because no one in New York has ever seen me drunk. And then everyone, regardless of age or anything, would go, that's crazy. One time I got so drunk that this happened. And it is interesting because, to your point, when it's younger people, they're excited about it. And then when it's people in their mid-30s or late 30s, they're kind of like, yeah, I used to be a bag of shit. And it is funny how that kind of takes a turn.
Well, it's fun to be a bag of shit.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a particular kind of fun that, I don't know. I think it's just ultimately awareness of consequences kicks in.
Yes.
And, for me, it was also recognizing the amount of times I had to kind of depend on the goodness of strangers. And that's another through line is just man, if this random person had not stepped up to take care of me in this moment, this would be a horror story instead of a charming anecdote. This is that's how I died.
Yeah, exactly. Before we get too far into anything, because I know you've got the music, you've got the you got a bunch of stuff. Plug everything up front. I always do it up front, and then we'll do it again at the end. But let everyone know where they can find you.
What's going on? You can find me around the city. I'm on the internet, on Instagram at Too Tall Paul. I have a band. My wife and I have an original indie folk rock blues crossover band called West Side Waltz. We have an album that is available. You can also catch me singing at private events and various 80s cover bands around the city. And stay tuned because there's probably going to be a lot more stuff happening as well.
Hell yeah. I saw you for the first time. God, it must have been a year or two ago. It was at Drew's Mic.
I think neighborhood of a year.
Yeah, and I remember you brought a guitar. And I was like, who the fuck is this guy? And then you were so good on stage. And I don't think you had been doing comedy long, but you had that presence of between theater and music, and I could be way off. You could be like, no, I've been doing comedy for 12 years. But
No. It's been about a year.
Yeah.
And there was kind of a dabbling period, but I do think that, I had a leg up because I've been in showbiz professionally for 20 years.
Yeah,
there's some stuff that translates and stuff that doesn't. But,
and I remember why, and it was funny, and you had such a good stage presence, and I was like, oh, this guy's obviously been around for a while. And then we talked after, and you're like, nah, just kind of checking it out, seeing what's going on. And then you have a bit, which I won't burn here, but your bit about the alpha males and podcasting is probably one of the funniest bits I've ever heard, which is, I mean, it's strange to think because like a bit is a bit. So it doesn't matter if you've been doing comedy 6 months or 60 years. Like a good bit is a good bit. And the timing, because it's so relevant now. And I was like, I got to get this guy on the pod. Because that, to me, I was just like, oh, that's everything that I like have been fighting again. Because everyone looks at me and they go, oh, you think you're like a Joe Rogan alpha guy? And I'm like, no. But the way you do it is so.
Well,
so if you haven't seen it, check out Paul, Too Tall Paul on Instagram. Find a date because that is gold.
It's a good one. I'm pleased with that, and it's funny. I was talking to my wife about what this is. I'm doing this podcast with this guy Brendan, and I was like, yeah, he's awesome. He's like a straight male comic who is consistently funny and never misogynistic, which is like
I appreciate it.
It's a shockingly rare combination of things.
Yeah, it's weird because I do have some. It is a weird thing because my thing has never been women hating or dick jokes or even sex jokes. I have a couple of them, but I don't. Even the one that I tell that's like my go-to, which is the butt stuff one, which I'm sure everyone's heard. But that is about how insecure I am.
Yeah.
And asking for something that I want and how like I just won't do it. And so again, that's a play on me. It's so weird. I think it was being raised by women is just having that. I had a friend the other day. I was at the Stand. It was a couple weeks ago, and they're like, "Oh, you're not in Las Vegas for Skankfest?" And I remember, without missing a beat, I just looked at him and I go, "No, I have a lot of respect for women." And I was just like, "Oh yeah, that's just."
It's wild, like being out in the mics. That like consistently and it depends on where you go, like less so with like Drew's mics at Greenwich Village and stuff. Shout out to Drew Tessier, best mics in New York City.
Shout out to Drew, friend of the show.
And but you still hear the like, man, women, why don't they ever shut up? Like, and I'm like, still?
Or you'll get the super aggro, like, I was fucking this bitch, and I'm like, all right, man, relax. This is it's your wife, dude.
And then 2 minutes later, like, now none of the bitches want to fuck me.
Yeah.
Like, what's up? What is up with these bitches? Like connect the dots, bro. Connect the dots.
It's not that hard. It's not that hard.
I don't know.
Let's talk about you.
Please.
So-
My favorite.
You have a very interesting history, and you've talked about it a little on stage, so I know a little bit of the backstory. But you grew up, obviously, in I don't want to say a military household, but your mother is in the military.
Not exactly.
Okay.
So there's a slightly misleading joke that I use just because it's just a funny thing to say
such
that
a
my
funny
mother
thing.
is Colonel Dr. Conway Saylor. And so she was a professor at a military college.
Oh, okay, that's what it was.
Yeah.
So where did you grow up?
South Carolina.
Okay.
I say Charleston, technically a little suburb right outside of Charleston,
Yeah.
but like Charleston gives people context because it's one of the only places in South Carolina anybody's ever heard of, and rightly so.
I have to do the same thing where I'm from in Florida. I have to say Daytona because I grew up literally just outside Daytona. Well, my dad did. My mom lived in Daytona, but it's like if I say Ormond, people are like, what? So I'm going to be like, Daytona, 386, baby, right till we die.
I knew it was going to be something on the level of Ormond.
Yeah,
Like,
it's Ormond Beach. Yeah, that's where
come on.
Dad was. What's up? What do you want from me? So growing up in South Carolina, you have you always known you wanted to do something in the arts because you went to school for musical theater?
I did, and it's this is a thing I've been processing a lot in therapy as I've sort of.
1 second, we're gonna get to it. I know you said wife a couple times, then we said musical theater. Don't worry, we'll get there.
Oh, it's juicy. Let's keep.
We're gonna get there, everybody.
Yeah, we got a lot to cover. I'm excited. So. Yeah, to your point, we're talking about
growing up in South Carolina, musical theater. Did you always know you wanted to be in the arts?
I always knew. I think the God's honest truth. I always knew I wanted people to like me.
Okay.
And I came up. I had some medical stuff of a very embarrassing and incontinence related nature, which does not set the scene for high social functionality. I also grew up with undiagnosed ADHD and had a lot of kind of so for me just having and keeping friends and feeling kind of socially safe was a challenge. Mm-hmm. And I knew that I had like the spark of showbiz in me because I have this fucking crazy energy. Yeah. And, when I got into it, I started out singing like with my family in church. And my first job in showbiz was singing Irish drinking songs and like folk tunes with my dad, who's
Oh,
a
really?
musician.
Okay.
And we would like gig around in the pubs in South Carolina, like starting when I was like 11 or 12.
Were you? Did you do it because that was what Dad was doing, or did you do it because your dad was like, "Oh, you can come with, like you're good at this, like let's go."
Yeah, and I think that phrase, "You're good at this,"
Yeah.
it was has kind of been a guiding light in my life.
Mm-hmm.
I sort of would be like, okay, I'm good at this. Ergo, people like me when I do this. This is my whole thing now.
Yeah. This is my whole personality.
Yeah. I was like, and you know,
that was me with football.
sure, exactly.
Yeah.
You know, it probably would have been me with football if I'd had any aptitude at football. Which, spoiler alert, I did not. You know, I might have, could have. Who's to say? But you know, showbiz, I took to very naturally and very quickly. I had a lot of kind of immediate. You know, I had I think some good genetics for vocals and just for kind of ability to put myself out there in big and crazy ways, and I enjoyed it. Again, it's where my brain chemistry becomes a superpower.
Yeah.
When it's like we need somebody who can like go all in on something really a little bit insane.
Yeah. I say the same thing in restaurants because growing up, I developed a hyper awareness just from things that had happened in my childhood. And so it's weird because my brain is everywhere like all the time. And in most jobs, you'd be like, you're doing 12 things at once. Like, you just focus on this one thing. And it's ADHD and it's not. But in the restaurant industry, it's perfect because it's like, and it's the same thing in comedy. I could be telling a joke and be thinking about the next 3 jokes that are coming while I'm still looking at all the audience and like gauging who's in, who's out, like who's on board with this bit. And so it actually benefits us in certain situations. Whereas if we were just working at an office, we would die. Like we'd be like, this,
Yeah.
I can't sit here and just put in numbers all day. I'm going to go crazy.
Yeah, no, and I did some like office temp for you know, early on when I was sort of doing all the I'm a musical theater guy jobs in the city. And yeah, that was kind of, you know, getting back to the overall trajectory. So I was kind of on the musical theater track through high school, through college.
Were you doing plays and stuff?
Yeah, doing plays, doing musicals. Again, so my pattern has sort of been once I glommed onto something that I was like, okay, this is a thing that I'm good at. This is a thing that makes people like me. This is it. I'm going to devote all my time and energy to this thing.
So what happens between 11 and 12 doing the stuff with your dad and then like say high school? Are you thinking the whole time like, oh, this is what I want to do? So when you get to high school, are you auditioning for plays or are you kind of in the backdrop? Like how do you make the transition into this is what I'm going to do?
So,
or were you doing plays before that?
The theater bug caught me in middle school.
Okay.
Because before that, I was a visual artist.
Got it.
And that was the first thing. I thought I was going to draw comic books. That was like when I
did
grow
not
up,
know that,
I'm going
yeah.
to draw comic books. Yeah. I'm still fairly good at it. I'll show you some sketches of these times. I've always just been picking up weird skills, and comedy is kind of the latest one.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I went to an arts school. And that ended up being like my worst years socially
For
and
middle
medically.
school?
Yeah, it was when I was going to the arts magnet school, and just everything went to shit, literally. It was, and you know, so I ended up. My parents pulled me out of that school, and I went to the private Baptist middle school.
There you go.
Which was kind of intended to be a safer environment, and it was. But then there's, you know, the whole Southern Baptist indoctrination thing, which became, but that was where I got my first taste of like musical theater. I think my first proper musical play was Christmas at Hope Central, which was a very putting the Christ back in Christmas kind of like. My big solo was called To Know Hope. And I haven't thought about it since the 7th grade, but I am now remembering that the track was to know hope is to know the love of Jesus.
Damn right.
Damn right. And so that was... Things are different now.
The way my brain works, when you said that my solo was no hope, I thought, no. Like, there is no hope. There is no hope.
There's no hope. Give up. That's the message of Christ. That's... we should start our own just like really pessimistic off-branch
Oh, that's
church.
my whole thing
Yeah.
is pessimism. It's so funny because Tracy, who you met, my girlfriend, she's not, I wouldn't even say like a super optimist, but much more optimistic than I am. So like we'll get into conversations about stuff and I'm always like end of the world scenario. And she always is like, that's not going to that's outrageous that you even think that could happen. And I'm like, it happens.
Yeah.
It's going to happen to me.
Well, I think it's frankly silly that you don't think it could. I mean,
My go-to is always end of the world apocalypse, and she's like, seriously? I can't win an argument if the setting is going to be the end of the world apocalypse. I'm like, it's coming. It's coming.
It's definitely, look, I don't know how you could like go on the internet for 12 minutes and not have some sort of sense of like, we got to be wrapping it up.
Might be over.
Like, right? Yeah. Like, I mean, it says.
Thanks for coming out, everybody.
Yeah. We should probably just end it here. I think.
So you're in 7th grade. You do know hope.
Yeah, I do know hope, but I had so much hope. And again, I caught the bug and was getting all this just positive reinforcement and praise, and people like, "Oh my God, you're so amazing!" And that was my first and most lasting addiction, baby. Like, yeah, tell me I'm worthy, and like.
Tell me you like me, please.
These people aren't going to leave me because I sing nice for them. And, started doing community plays and stuff and really got that, like, I'm going to be on Broadway.
Were your parents super supportive? I'm assuming your dad, of course, would be. Because
yeah, and, my dad, like, was super supportive. And my parents, both of them, I feel really lucky. They both, I would say that the greatest gesture of love up until very recently when they came and saw me do stand-up comedy in a basement for the first time. But prior to that was when I was 10 years old, they bought me a drum set.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Like, what is unconditional love if not buying a 10-year-old boy a full-on drum set?
Yeah.
And, and that was one of the first things I did in music. But yeah, when I got into musical theater, they loved it. They came and saw all my shows.
That's awesome.
Helped me get to and from. I would really say stuff to them like, hey, when I was in high school, it's a school night. I'm like, hey, I'm going to the bar with a bunch of the college kids after the rehearsal. Like, fine, be home eventually. Like,
that's so cool.
I'm just happy he's got friends.
Yeah. God, remember when he didn't have any? Now he's got all these friends.
Yeah, and so I loved it. I really, I make it sound like it was this compulsive thing, but I really did. It was really exciting and fun being on stage, and I do think the through line of a lot of what's come since is I really do love the connection with people that comes from being on stage in any capacity, whether it's music or theater or comedy. Like, yeah,
it's so poignant you said that, because that's one of my things is when I tell a joke, and there's layers to some of my material where it's like I try to make it funny on the surface for the dullards and like the people in the audience who are like, hump the stool, do an impression. Like, I try to make it funny for those people, but what really gets me is when there's like a darker kind of undertone to it. And you can tell by the way people react. Like, if it really gets them and they're like laughing, you're like, you get it.
Yeah.
You get it.
You get
and
it.
that makes me feel like, oh, I'm not alone. You're not alone. Like, we're all in this together.
100%. I want to ask you, because so when I was first getting started, I did a lot of like watching videos. I did like master classes and stuff, just kind of to the extent that it's possible to learn comedy academically, which it really isn't.
Yeah.
And that's like the big thing everybody says, like, every class starts with there is no class.
Yeah.
You just got to freaking do the thing.
Anytime anyone's like, oh, I want to try comedy, I'm like, I'll come to a mic. I'll send you a list. Let's go.
Do it.
You just got to do it.
Yeah, and suck until you suck less.
Suck until you suck less.
That's the long and the short. But my point in bringing it up is that one of the through lines of a lot of this first thing is it's like, listen, comedy is a place for the introverts who never fit in and don't know how else to connect with. And I'm like an extrovert's extrovert.
Okay.
I do need, a certain amount of alone time to recharge, but like it was a weird thing for me to overcome. I was like, am I just nuts in the sense that I actually thrive on the fact that I'm here with a bunch of strangers?
Yeah, it's interesting because I'm an extroverted introvert.
Okay.
So like when you see me at the mics and we're all like talking and hanging out and I always sit at the same table, but I always sit in the same spot. Like,
yep.
I don't get to a mic and I'm like, oh, let me go hang out with everybody kind of a thing. Like, I'm fine with being alone. In fact, Tracy would argue I enjoy being alone a lot more than I enjoy being around people. So I'm very pretentious when it comes to comedy. I'm always like, oh, we have to say something. We have to use our platform to challenge the status quo. But I'm a douche, so that checks out. But to your point, I'm very much an introvert. Like, I love being on stage and connecting with people because of all the struggles that I went through with my addictions and my self-harm and all that kind of stuff and my depression. So I like being able to make people laugh at those kind of things and realize they're not alone. But when I get off stage, probably one of the worst things for me is like after the show, if I'm still at the club and like if people want to come up and talk to me, I'm happy to do it. And I've developed that muscle working in the service industry and doing comedy for as long as I have to where I can do it. Like I'm not socially inept, but at the same time, the whole time in my head, I'm thinking, if I leave right now, I can get home and still have a couple hours to like play my video game or watch my shows or do something like that by myself. That's just what's running in my head. Like Tracy has a lot of friends all the way from middle school, all the way up through college, and even like New York friends. And she's always like, "Oh, I'm going out with this group or I'm going out with that group." And I'm like, "Okay, have fun." Sounds like a blast. I'm going to sit here by myself and play Xbox.
And that is so much more typical
Yeah.
of what people in comedy tend to describe.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, I'm over here like, literally anytime somebody wants to come up to me after the show, and I think it taps back into that old thing. Someone's like, "Oh, you were so great." It's like, "Do you want a hug?" Yes, I want a hug. Like,
you're like, absolutely.
I am liked.
Which is funny because I genuinely seek that validation, but it is weird because I want that validation so badly, but I also just don't like being around people, like a lot of people. Yeah. If that makes any kind of sense.
Oh, it makes 100% sense.
That's why like it is weird too because I am that guy. I am the guy where like after the show I'd rather sit in the green room or I'd rather not come out before. And it took me a long time because I had been doing comedy on and off for a while before I moved to New York. So in my head I was like, oh, the hang is the most important thing. Like I need to go to these bigger clubs and like get to know some of these comics that I've been watching on TV and stuff. And I've been good at that because even though I'm naturally an introvert, I was raised, but my dad was in sales, my older sister's in marketing. Like I was raised around people where it was instilled at me at a young age. You look someone in the eye, you give them a firm handshake, like be in the moment, be in the moment. So even though it's not comfortable for me, when I'm around other people, I can do that. But it is interesting because there are so many times where I will walk into like the stand or the olive tree where the cellar is and like do a quick survey, be like, oh, there's no one in this room that I even know like enough to sit down at the table. And I will just turn around and walk out. That's how much I'm like, nope, not doing it.
Yeah. No, I can't. And honestly,
you seem very much like you're like, I'm here.
Yeah, it's like, hey, any strangers want to drink together and tell each other our life stories and be friends? Like, but I have noticed I've shifted more to that end of the spectrum, I think, since kind of being in showbiz now as long as I have. And I don't know, I think partly just getting older, I don't have quite the same stamina that I once did. Yeah. For me, when I find myself in that place of like, I'd rather just go home and watch TV or whatever, it's more of it's less of a I don't want that energy to share with people and more I'm tired. Yeah. Like that does happen when you get older. I have not been tired in 7 years. Like, it's so tired. Yeah. And especially because I'm a creature of habit and routine. Mm-hmm. So like no matter what, I get up and I go to the gym 6 days a week. Like I always try to like get certain things done before I go into work. Like today I got up, I went to the gym, we're recording this, and then I have to go to work. I didn't get home from work until 1:00 in the morning this morning because I had to close. And then, by the time you get home, you eat something, you get ready for bed. It was like 3:00, but it was like, no, at 9:00, it's like, I got to be up. And that happens all the time. So, and I'm sure people listening to this are like, yeah, that's life. But to your point, our jobs entail hanging out and networking. Yeah. Like people are like, oh, you're just hanging out with your friends. It's like, no, I booked 3 guests for the podcast. Like I'm working. Yeah. And so we still have to be like, oh, I really don't want to fucking go hang out. But Dave Chappelle's at the stand. Everyone's going to be there. I could book a guest. I got to go. Yeah. And in so many ways, I think the resistance to that really gets in people's way. Yeah. This sense that like the work should be good. It's like there's just too much work. There's too much comedy. There's too much music. You could always be doing something. Yeah, it's a lot. Yeah, and there's Steve Martin has the thing of be so good they can't ignore you, which I love, and I do think fundamentally like continuing to just always be hammering away at the craft and trying to get that perfect bit. But having said that, we now live in a media landscape where so much of it is about people have to like you. Yeah. To succeed in an entertainment media, you can't do it without that sense of human connection and people wanting to be your buddy. Yeah. And I do think that like so much of it, the people that I talk to who like have a distaste for that or a resistance to that are like, oh, it's, I don't want to like fake it and I don't want to like feel like I have to put on a social show for people. It's like, then don't fake it. Just like cultivate the skill of being friendly.
Or
like,
that is 100% true, but it's also a barrier of it because like not everyone is. So to that exact point, I meet people all the time who are like, oh, I think I'm funny. Like my friends think I'm funny. I want to try comedy, but then they go up and they bomb, and they just don't have that built-in like thing where it's like, I don't care. Like I'm going to keep doing this. And it's the same thing with the social aspect where some people are just like, oh, I don't want to do that. And it's like, okay, then do something else. Like you don't, no one says you have to do this. Like go do something else.
Yeah. Or you know, if you do want to just like work on the craft to do it and to do it for fun, which is kind of what has brought me to stand up initially. It was just something that I was fascinated by. I had for many years, and we're sort of skipping a bit in the journey, but the turn to stand up for me came from just, I am listening to only stand up and not listening to music anymore recreationally.
Okay.
Clearly I have this obsession with this and I want to do it. So I had started it maybe for the first time in my life with no real sense of like, this is going to be my ticket to the next thing, or this is what's going to make me successful. It's just like, I just really like this and I want to do it.
I want to try it,
So for people who do just want to do it, that's fine. And it's fine if you don't want to do the hang and you don't want to like participate in the social element of it, because that, you know, who cares?
Yeah.
You don't need to be, you know, booking and doing all this stuff. But I do think on a certain level, if you want to be successful in any showbiz medium, it's the Keanu Reeves thing.
Yeah.
He sucks. Nobody disputes that the man is not great at acting, including him. I don't think Keanu would get up on screen and be like, I'm a fantastic actor. But no one will say anything besides how much they love that guy.
He's the best. He's the best. Have you
Everybody
seen those
loves
stories?
that guy. All the stories.
He's so awesome.
Giving millions to the VFX team, and they're like, hey, we need you to get proficient with guns. He's like, okay, I'll become like a certified sharpshooter and beat, you know, Navy SEALs at their own shooting drills. Like what?
It's insane.
Yeah.
Him, and then the other person who I would argue is the same as that is Tom Cruise.
Yeah.
And say what you want about the Scientology and stuff. I know people who have worked with him on sets, and they're like the lowliest grip. He'll come up to and he'll be like, hey, John, how's your mom? Is she still okay with the thing? And the guy's like, yeah, Tom, she's Mr. Cruise. She's great. He like knows everybody's name. He knows everything that's going on with everybody. He's like the most warm, like the sweetest guy on set. And everyone was like, oh, what about the video when he was freaking out during COVID? It's like, because he even says it in the video when he's yelling, he's like, thousands of people rely on this to feed their families. If you're not going to do it, like follow the guidelines, then fucking get out of here.
Yeah.
Because he's trying to protect everyone else. And it's just, but I would never be like Tom Cruise. He's up there with Gary Oldman as far as acting.
I will say he's solid. He's more solid than people give him. That man.
See, I'm not giving him credit.
Yeah. Look at you. What a dick. Brandon. Think you're so great. Why don't you go make a Mission Impossible?
He still does all his own stunts at 60 years old.
Dude, shut the fuck up.
It's insane.
I can't even think about it because it just puts me in that spiral of like, what the fuck am I even doing?
What are we doing?
Like we're doing. Like,
what are we even doing?
What are we doing? We're having fun.
We're having a great time.
Yeah, we're talking about life and art. You know,
that is what life is. It's art.
Life is all art. Art is life.
God,
am I the artist or am I the art? Who's to say?
Let's go back.
Let's go back.
High school. So now you're doing musical theater. You're doing plays all the time. Do you go to a specific high school for this, or do you just go to a regular high school?
I did. I actually, after middle school, I went back to the same school where I had tapped out from extreme social collapse and medical stuff.
Yeah.
And there's a moment that I will always treasure when there was a girl who I had a major crush on in 6th grade. And her name was Sam, and she came up to me like,
Shout out Sam.
Shout out Sam McMasters, wherever you are now.
And you're going to text me in about 20 minutes and be like, hey, can you take out the last name?
Probably. I would be stunned if she remembers
I'm just going to get
who
the
I
time
am.
code just in case. All right.
All right. Yeah, we can bleep it.
28 minutes in.
We'll call her Miss X. But she came up to me like day one when I came back, and this time as a theater major. Before I was studying visual art, now I was a theater kid. I was like, hey, I'm really sorry we were such dicks to you in middle school.
Really?
And she was the only person who kind of acknowledged that in that way.
Yeah.
And I've held on to that for like my entire life. It's just like, man, never underestimate the value in just like, hey, I see and care that you were going through some stuff, and I'm sorry that I wasn't supportive of you in that way. And so
that's the best, because as someone who got bullied a lot, obviously in middle school and even through high school, I didn't make the transition into not getting bullied until I was in college. And
I want to interject that is obvious to me, but only because I know what to look for.
Yeah.
I don't know that it would be obvious to everybody
It's
because
not.
you are a stout son of a bitch.
I know I always have to be like, this doesn't come from nowhere.
Well, and also I was like, that's a trauma bench, man.
Yeah.
That's like, you don't get to 4 plates by having a
say it
well-adjusted
all the
childhood,
time.
baby.
People are always like, what's your secret? And I go, find the hate in your heart.
Yeah, like find the unhealed wounds and just tear them open.
As my
mid-set,
old strength coach used to say, you got to find the hate in your heart. But I say that to say, like, I have run into, since obviously it's been 15 to almost 20 years since I was in high school, I have run into people who bullied me and stuff in high school, and they come at it as like, oh, we were just buddies. We were all just dicking around. And I was like, I wanted to die. Like, I literally tried to kill myself because of this. And they're like, no, we were just messing with you, man. And it's like, okay, well, I'm glad I got Baker acted in 5150 because you guys were all just playing around.
And the fucked up part
covered
of it for
in
me,
blood.
Like, yeah, like, and I think they were 100% honest about that.
Yeah, no, and that's...
I was just out in Pennsylvania, and I was just like carrying a basket of random stuff from one place to another.
Yeah.
And a random neighbor comes up to me. He's like, "Hey, is that your picnic basket? Hope you're not wearing pink socks." Which was like a weird shade of like, I'm like, I know this is homophobic. I don't fully understand the mechanics of how.
I don't understand how, but it is.
But I was
It
like, this is
definitely is.
clearly. But it felt so good natured. Like he was clearly just trying in his weird old straight man language to connect with me, because this is just how guys connect.
Yeah.
By playfully attacking each other for potentially doing something gay, like carrying a basket. Like, I did not choose that moment to be like, I'm not wearing pink socks, but I do suck the occasional black dick. Like, like, it's like,
Just to see the look on his face, you probably would have been like,
and a good day to you, sir. But it's there's this weird, and I participated in it. I remember there was one of the first musicals I did. There was a guy who my sister actually dated for a while, and he was like a couple years ahead of me, and a rumor started spreading when he left for college that he had been like experimenting with guys in college. And everybody was like, yeah, sure, experimenting, gay. And something about the social feedback of like, okay, this is a joke that everyone's participating in, and I want to be one of the boys. So I was like, yeah, not fooling anybody, Andrew, gay. Because that's what being one of the boys was all about.
Meanwhile,
this is how masculine social interaction works. Is cruel, casual homophobia and bi erasure, and like gay. Like this is.
and then you just like lean over and you're like, I wish I could experiment.
I didn't. Because
because you talk about this on stage. This is something I wanted to get into.
Yeah, and it's a thing. When I finally did. Because there was always something there.
Yeah.
And participating. I'm sure you see that, like, even just participating in bodybuilding, which is just the gayest thing that there is.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting here watching hours of content on my phone of just like, I'm just watching men oil up and flex.
That's it.
Like a lot.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna like pretend that this is not a little bit of something. And I'd always liked the attention from men. I always, would like get a thrill if a man was interested in me. But because I knew I liked pussy, and I think because that was connected to so much.
Another
of what
great bit that you have also. Another great bit.
I do like that one too.
That was very good. Because it's very honest.
It's true.
About the choices.
When.
Or lack thereof.
Yeah. And that's why I do think, shout out to my fellow closeted bi guys, that like when you receive so much social currency for doing straight, for for talking shit about people who are potentially bi, for and even so, we talked about my parents. My parents were super supportive. I truly believe that if I had come out as gay, they would have loved me and supported me 100%. But at the same time, anytime I expressed interest in women, anytime I, said something playfully misogynistic and even borderline creepy about women, my dad was like, aha, that's my boy.
Yeah.
And so, and not just him, just men in general.
It happens at work all the
yeah.
time because I work in a restaurant and there's like super misogynistic, like the guys that you have described in your bits and that we all know who I'm talking about. And they're like, yo, did you see the tits on 34? And I'm like, don't, that's that. But I think in my head, like, that's gross. Like, don't, you could just say, hey, there's a very attractive woman at that table. But what I end up saying almost always is like, oh, yeah.
Oh, we both love tits because
Yeah,
we're straight. And then, because you know what, we're not gay.
But it is like a natural reaction because it's built on the societal structure of, and you address this in the bit, which is, again, having bits that say something more to challenging the status quo are things I'm very interested in and I find incredibly funny at the same time. So the bit that you have where you're basically calling out the entire social structure, and it's like, yeah, that is how that works.
Yeah.
And it kind of sucks.
It does. And even, I do think that there are just legitimately so many more bisexual or potentially bisexual or somewhere on the Kinsey scale spectrum besides just striggity straight than, people tend to be in the room with. And I do think that so much of that, again, has to do with that perpetual social reinforcement about, getting masculinity cred and all this. And, I had an older joke about how, like, men will do all kinds of weird and uncomfortable shit, including like cultivating a taste for scotch.
Yeah.
Because some other man in their life at some point was like, this is what men do. This is what puts hair on your chest. And then develop like a pathological aversion to anything that doesn't fit those criteria.
Yep.
So like, how could you even honestly ask the question? And, in terms of my journey, there was a lot of time between when I first, became bi-curious and the first time I actually was like, you know what? I'm going to suck this dick and I'm actually going to let myself like it.
Yeah.
Like I as opposed to, I think the straight thing that comes up a lot, you'll have like comics get up and be like, I experimented with a guy, it wasn't for me, I didn't get hard. It's like, of course you didn't. Like
in your brain, it was like, you better fucking not.
And some part of you, it's like the thing, the Chuck and Larry thing of like two guys kissing.
Yeah.
I'm only doing this to prove that I don't like it to myself and other people. But like actually asking the question openly takes some work.
Yeah.
And takes some kind of deconstructing of a lot of stuff.
And you did it.
I did it. Hooray!
So now that we kind of got to how you got into comedy, I want to talk to you about a couple of things, because obviously the premise of the show is Ex-Drinking Buddy.
For sure.
You sent me a huge list of stories, which I really want to run down. Before we get too far into these stories, because you talked about your background, being in bars, singing these folk songs and stuff, these Irish drinking songs. Were you a drinker when you were younger? Like, how old were you when you first started drinking?
Oh, no, because I was a Christian.
Yes.
And, like, for serious. Yeah, like, Jesus and musical theater. Those were my two big things. And that's a weird combination. Makes for a very interesting person indeed.
Yes, it does.
Yeah, I don't think I actually had my first drink until I was 20.
Okay.
My dad let me taste a beer.
Yeah,
in terms of, like, actually... drinking.
So you went away to college for musical theater?
I did.
Okay, and so you're in college for a couple years before you even try any of this stuff.
Yeah. Which is, yeah. And boy, oh boy, let me tell you.
That's where I was going.
This is how it is? Wow. Like, I could have been doing this the whole time.
I say it all the time. That was my experience. And the person who put it the best was when I had Joe List on the podcast. He was like... because he grew up like same as you in that environment where it's like, no, I'm not going to do that. And I grew up watching how it made other people turn. And I was like, that's a poison. I'm not going to try it. Like, this is gross. And then same thing. As soon as I tried it and then he put it, he was like, Oh, this is what you guys have been doing the whole time? This is great.
Yeah.
I want to keep doing this.
And it connects to this other thing we were talking about too, because the first night that I actually like got tipsy,
let's set the stage. Let's talk about it.
Was at a college party. And, there's just the constant peer pressure because people who are drinking and partying want everybody to be participating so that nobody has to sit in the fact that we're poisoning ourselves to socially lubricate. And
are you at a public school, private school, Christian school?
Not officially a Christian school, but kind of. It was a small liberal arts school, Catawba College in Salisbury, North Carolina.
Shout out Catawba.
Shout out Catawba. Toxic theater. It was... That's a different podcast. Just entirely unpacking the toxicity of theater academia. But, that first time, I took that first big chug and the room exploded. It was Smirnoff Ice.
Yes, it was.
Yes, it was. Smirnoff Ice, turning non-drinkers into drinkers since soda tasted like soda.
So you take a big swig of Smirnoff Ice
and the room,
like,
standing ovation like I had just cured something. It's like, yeah!
Paul's drinking!
Yeah! This is the best thing he's ever done! And, every subsequent time that I actually, got wasted... again, that was, I don't even know what to compare it to. It was
it goes back to what you were talking about earlier, the validation from others and how addicting that can be.
100%. And in many ways, I think that feeling of I'm one of the guys. We're all in this together. I'm part of this. Has always and still kind of is, although I'm more onto it now, the best part of getting fucked up.
Yeah.
And it's, it's not coincidental that it's the thing that can, if I'm in a situation where I'm not comfortable, which a lot of these stories connect to be like, wait, I could turn this into a comfortable situation where everybody's my friend.
I have a magic elixir.
Indeed.
So the first time you said you just got a little tipsy the first time.
Yeah. Things escalated
Okay.
from there.
I want to, now if at any point you think of something else while we're talking, go ahead and throw it in.
Oh, for
because
sure.
We're going to have you back on because this is a lot of stories that you sent me. But I want to go kind of almost chronologically from that first time you drank, and I definitely want to talk about your wedding day because that always. So the Whiz, is that early in the run or is that
the Whiz is actually kind of a two-parter. The first one chronologically is Lock, Stock, and Barrel.
All right, let's talk about it. Lock, Stock, and Barrel.
So Lock, Stock, and Barrel, shout out to my musical theater fans, are two characters in Urinetown the Musical.
Okay.
So this was my senior year of college, and I was playing Officer Lockstock, and my buddy Matt Patrick. Shout out to Matt Patrick.
Shout out Matt Patrick.
Who actually is several years sober now.
Oh, shout out Matt Patrick.
Yeah, and has always been just a good fucking dude.
Yeah.
And this story kind of exemplifies the extent to which he is a good fucking dude, without whom I would probably be a much less safe and healthy dude. So it was a college party, and this was probably getting towards the peak in terms of my upslope with my drinking habits.
Yeah.
The peak of this is a cool thing that people do. I believe it was Matt's brother. Somebody's brother was in town who was a military guy.
Okay.
And at this point, I had kind of also gotten hooked on the competitive part of it because, I'm a big guy. I lift weights. It takes a lot to tank me. Mm-hmm. And that's another one of those things that makes you impressive and interesting in this environment. So this particular night, I decided to go head to head with a military guy in a drink off.
Do you know who my mom is? Colonel
Dr. Conway Saylor, who I've seen drunk exactly one time.
But just trying to play it off like, I know all about the military.
Well, no, it's funny because I've drunk with some of the hardest drinking demographics there are. Military guys are in the top 5 for sure.
Yeah.
College kids in general, but the number one that I've experienced is Shakespeare Festival technicians. I'm just real time. If you know, you know. If you have ever gone drinking with Shakespeare Festival, nobody can touch them because I don't know. It's these are people who work with their hands, who do extremely demanding technical jobs, and just get fucked up to hell and back every day of the week to deal with it. And who
did not see that coming?
Yeah, no, it's please. You think the Army can drink?
Go to a
let
Shakespeare
me introduce
festival.
you to the master carpenter of the Arkansas Shakespeare Theater, sir. Like,
Oh God.
we did. That was so. In
You
this
go
particular,
head-to-head.
but you still don't want to go head to head with the military
Yeah.
because those guys throw down.
Yeah.
Throw down and in my case throw up. So that was the beginning of the end. Things were actually going well. We were drinking beer, which at that point I was like, I've cracked the code. If I just drink beer,
You can just drink
it
and
doesn't
drink and
matter
drink.
how
Yeah.
much I drink. Or so I thought. But then we decided, okay, we should have a race. Because this isn't enough competition, so we decided to do like a half-mile foot race
Really?
after the, dozen and change beers that we had both had.
Yeah.
And that was also one of the first nights I ever smoked weed.
Oh, okay.
So it was first cross buzzing.
How old are you at the time?
I was 21, 22, something
Okay, so
like
this
that.
is shortly after you started drinking. It's
Yeah.
not like you had a career of drinking.
Nope. It was. I had not really had time to read the manual yet at this point. I was still kind of like learning on the fly.
On the job training.
Retrospectively, it was equivalent to like signing up for a competition festival show, having done like 3 open mics.
Yeah.
It was like, no, this is the big time. You are not ready. And
So you had a half-mile foot race.
We had a half-mile foot race. I won. I was feeling very victorious.
Fuck yeah.
And then I was feeling much less victorious immediately. And then, what remains is a series of pseudo-blackout memories, beginning with me sitting in the bathroom, crying over the toilet, vomiting profusely, and saying stuff like, I need to go to the hospital. I don't think I'm okay right now. So between...
What is military man doing? Is he just walking around
He's
with a beer?
still fucking drinking. He's like, okay, who's next? Like...
I killed this motherfucker.
Yeah. One. Is there no one else?
Is there no one else? He just looks at you and goes, that's why no one will remember your name.
I'm so happy that you were just with me on the Troy references.
course.
I fucking love Troy.
Love that movie.
Hell yeah.
So many good lines in that movie.
So many good lines. So some of the best fight choreo on film.
Plus, it's all about love.
Is it?
It's all about love.
I kind of feel like it's mostly about violence, but
Well, I say the same thing when people, because I'm a big Star Wars fan, but I wear a lot of like dark side stuff, like the Vader and stuff like that. And people are always like, are you like people who know Star Wars are like,
are you evil?
like, what's wrong? And I'm always like, no, Vader's just the greatest love story ever.
Okay, well, because you've said that, I now have to plug a book called Song of Achilles.
Okay.
Which, if you haven't read it, that's the version of the Troy story that is actually all about love, and it is sublimely beautiful.
I love that kind of
beautiful,
stuff.
One of the most beautiful love stories.
Everyone's
I've
like,
ever
oh, it's
read.
all about violence. I'm like, no, it's about Paris taking Helena, but not being strong enough to fight for her. And it starts this whole war. And Achilles, who falls in love with the Trojan. And it's beautiful.
So, what is lacking in the story of Achilles is the love story of Achilles and Patroclus.
Okay. Did not know that.
Yeah, and again, which there, depending on who
His
you ask,
nephew?
there is textual evidence for. They refer to them in the movie as cousins.
Oh, that's, yeah.
Which is not quite
Yeah.
it. He's sort of a ward. I don't know the source material terribly well, but I will tell you that when that love story is at the heart of it, it becomes so much more poignant and beautiful. And the conflict between Achilles wanting to be the warrior whose name will be remembered for all time and Achilles wanting to just have a simple life with the man he loves.
Mm-hmm.
Heartbreaking stuff.
It makes a lot more sense now when Patroclus, spoiler alert, gets killed and then he flips a switch.
Please, no spoilers from the Iliad.
But he flips that switch. When he gets killed, he loses it. And
Yeah.
kills everybody.
But imagine that now times 1,000 with the weight of like my sole meaning in life has died along with that. And then like what he becomes after.
It's Vader all over again.
It's Vader all over again.
Padme dies and he
Connections.
just starts killing everybody.
Basically, Troy is Star Wars.
See, we can connect.
We can connect. This is Brandon. I'm happy that you brought me here. I'm afraid we're gonna have to be bros after this.
So then what happens? You're dying.
Yes,
You're
I'm
vomiting in the
dying. I'm
toilet.
vomiting, and
I like these little details. So like what's the last thing you remember? And then when you wake up the next day, are you like, I'm never drinking again?
What I remember and what is so moving to me about the story is my boys coming to my rescue.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the thing that makes these stories still a little nostalgic. Like the thing that adds beauty in spite of what is ultimately just a pretty run-of-the-mill being young, dumb, and fucking it up story.
Yeah.
Is the way that like Matt, Pat, and my buddy Alex, who is just one of the best friends a person could ever have. He lives in Japan now. Shout out to Alex in Japan. Him and Matt, Pat, between the two of them, got me in a car, got me back to the dorm, and literally carried my big ass up 4 flights of stairs to my dorm while I was literally just throwing up on Matt Pat as he was carrying me like a baby up the stairs the entire way. And on the one hand, that is like, wow, if that's not love, I don't know what is. But on the other hand,
brother's love is a brother's love.
That should have been a wake-up call, too. It's like, and there's a certain poignancy to the fact that the conversation the next day was, hey, man, I got you. I'll always have your back. As opposed to, hey, man, maybe don't do that.
There are so many times I think back to where my alcoholism is my own doing and stuff, but there's so many times I think back to like, I wonder if this would have been curved if someone in my 20s was like, hey, cut it the fuck out.
Yeah. This is not
instead of this like, yeah.
Yeah. And even like for years, that story was like, tell the fun story about that time you half blacked out and had to be carried up the stairs whilst puking on me. How, kids being kids, drinking poison till they almost die.
Yeah, I say it all the time. I got alcohol poisoning when I was in college, and everyone's like, "Oh, is that when you decided to stop drinking?" And I'm like, "No, not even a little bit." In fact, when I got released from the hospital, I went drinking.
Yeah, that was when I like received my promotion, my next star.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
That's when I went from Padawan to master.
You leveled up, man.
Yeah.
You leveled up.
But it is interesting how that can happen. So then what happens next? I'm assuming Matt has a lot to do with some of these stories.
No.
Just that one?
Well, because we, he went to Chicago after college, so we're still in touch a little bit, and he actually helped. I had another friend, who is a very dear friend of mine who is also sober now, and he was like calling me when he was at rock bottom and just like needed somebody to talk to.
Yeah.
And Matt Pat was the first guy I called to be like, hey, I've got a buddy who's like really in the shit, trying to get sober. Who should I direct him to? What should I do?
Yeah.
And
that's one of my favorite things. And it sounds twisted to say favorite, but it is. But it is. I love it when I'm known as like I'll have friends who are like, hey, I got this buddy. You've never met him, but like he's really can I give him your number? I'm like, abso-fucking-lute, please.
Yeah.
Because the only way I can stay sober is like through the things that I do. And there's a super secret program that I, don't try to mention as much as possible, but
top secret. Yes.
Top secret. I'd tell you about it, but it's anonymous. That's a bit I do on stage.
It's a good bit.
And then when anybody laughs, I go, they've been to a meeting. And then they're always like, oh, this is awkward. But that's like one of the things that helps me stay sober immensely is like helping other people when they're going. And that's the thing is like, and I've had this talk, I guess you'd call it, with my sponsor where he's like, you got to be doing more. And I'm like, I do the podcast. Like people listen. It helps them. But he's absolutely right because there's no better feeling for me in my sobriety than like showing someone else that like there's hope. It's that whole story of like, I dug myself into a hole and then the man jumps down and you're like, what are you doing? Now we're both in the hole. And he goes, yeah, but I know the way out. Like that's the whole thing behind it. So shout out to Matt Pat, man, coming through off the top rope.
Absolutely, Matt Pat. But so chronologically, the next one is The Wiz. And I called it that because, again, it's another one of those stories that's fairly run-of-the-mill, like I got drunk and made an ass of myself.
Yeah.
But it's made far more fun by the context and who is involved.
So what is it?
So The Wiz, for those who don't know, was a Broadway musical.
Yes.
And the guy who played The Wiz originally is Broadway icon and Tony Award winner Andre DeShields.
Of course, Andre DeShields. We all know that.
I don't know. Do you know that actually?
No,
or you just
I had no
okay,
idea.
I was going to say, you seem awfully straight to know that. But like But he is iconic. Comedy nerds would know him best from John Mulaney's Sack Lunch Bunch.
Oh, okay.
He's the one-eyed algebra guy, which I think John Mulaney did specifically because he's that kind of musical theater nerd.
Yeah.
Which I love. Shout out to John Mulaney.
Shout out to John Mulaney.
Who's definitely watching this and listening to the podcast.
I don't know.
right?
I got beef with John. So.
Oh, okay.
I'm just kidding.
Oh.
I say I have beef. I do the bit about like doing my one-man show and stuff, and I was like so excited, and I was like, oh, I'm going to release this on May 31st, my sobriety date, and then 2 weeks before, John Mulaney released his special about sobriety, and I was like, this motherfucker.
I like to think he did it on purpose
Me
because of
too.
some
In my
bad
head.
blood he has with you.
In my head, I'm like the internet's a big place. He probably saw me promoting it and was like,
Not today, Tass.
called Netflix and was like, hey, you know how we said June? Move it up to May 13th. That's the narrative I play in my head.
I like to think so. I like to think he was intimidated by you.
You know,
frankly,
it happens.
I get it.
6'1", 230 pounds of twisted steel and sex appeal, baby.
Yeah, it's like, yeah, you're funny, but can you bench 4 plates, Mulaney?
Can you?
Can you?
Mulaney, or should I say Milady?
Oh, yeah, paper covers rock.
So the Wiz. We're at the Wiz.
Was the perfect high five for that exchange. So the Wiz. We're not at the Wiz, but we are a young musical theater fanboy who has been listening to this man and albums and stuff. And so I had an agency that I was working with when I first got to the city and was very much like, I'm going to be a Broadway guy.
Boy, oh boy.
And it was the same agency that reps Andre.
Okay.
So I was at this, it was the holiday party put on by the agency. They had an open bar.
So a couple of questions.
Yes.
You're a young kid. You just moved to New York.
Yeah, I think I was like 21, 22, 23, somewhere in
And
there.
are you freaking out because you got an agency, or was that expected when you got here?
Both.
Okay, because when I first was asked for avails by a club, I called like my whole family, and I was like, I finally made it.
Yeah. No.
And then I didn't get booked a single date. So like when you are at school majoring in musical theater, are you thinking I'll move to New York, I'll get an agent? Like that, those are just
Yeah. And
Okay.
I actually, I made the connection through some people that I worked with in a summer stock show.
Okay.
Shout out to Rob and Marie.
out.
We're just going to keep shouting out everybody
That's what
in
we
my
do. We
life
do it.
today. You know, they were a legit Broadway agency, and these
Okay.
were people who had been on Broadway, and so like I knew it was a big deal to have this connection.
Okay.
And when they brought me on,
How does
knew
that
it
happen?
was a big deal.
Do you reach out to them? Do they reach out to you? Like, how does that work for the musical theater and the connections that you had made?
The same way it happens anywhere else. You do good work, you make friends, and people say, hey, I like you, I like your work.
Yeah.
In this instance, I was doing a production of South Pacific, which I was playing like the young romantic lead, which this was during a phase of my life where the running joke was my last name is Saylor. And that was all the fuck I did in theater, was play guys who go to sea and then fall in love and go, I'm in love and I went to sea. And that was it. That was my life.
You are a sailor.
I am a sailor. But in this one, I was a sailor who actually dies in Act 2.
Who?
Sorry to do South Pacific spoilers. So I
we're
was
spoiling
like,
everything.
I was like the
Iliad,
second tier lead.
Star
The guy,
Wars.
like, I still just love the idea that somebody was like halfway through the Iliad and was like, fuck! Like,
Listening to this, I want to see the Venn diagram of people who have read and or are reading the Iliad and listen to this podcast.
I bet it's bigger than you might expect. I think you
If
probably
I had
have
a nickel for every time people have said that.
Yeah. Oh, we're having fun. I can't remember what. We're talking about the agency. The Wiz.
Because these little details,
yeah.
because a lot of times I'll have people on, especially in the comedy world, because I'm in that world, and they'll be bigger
Yeah.
comics, and they're like, yeah, so I moved to New York, and I just called my agent, and I was like, oh, no, I was like, whoa. I moved to New York years ago. I've been doing comedy for a long time. I don't just have a call my agent story. I don't have an agent. So, like, these little details I'm obsessed with. So, you get to New York. Do you get with the agency before or after you moved to New York?
After, but because I had the connection, and they literally said to me at the end of that summer, and like we got to be tight. They liked my work.
Yeah.
I liked their work, and they were a couple that had this adorable little girl who is now like 23 or something, which makes me nuts.
Yeah.
Because I basically like helped babysit her. Like I love kids. I've always been good with kids, and so we just sort of bonded as like
And they saw you in the South Pacific?
Well, we worked together on it.
Okay.
He was the main lead,
Got it.
Emile DeBeck. the manliest role in all of musical theater, quite possibly. And she was the choreographer.
Okay.
Despite that she was also a Broadway leading lady. She played the lead in Phantom of the Opera back in the day.
Damn.
Yeah.
This is like a legit.
No, she was legit. My favorite interaction with her was the one time she took me aside and was just, because I was very like figuring out my voice and figuring out how to tell a story through song. She's like, just sing the goddamn song. I was like,
This is like that scene in The Town where John Hamm's like, "This is the not fucking around crew."
Yeah, it was the best advice I ever got in show business.
Just sing the
honestly,
damn
it was
song.
like just whatever this is that you're doing, stop. Just sing the song. And I was like, oh yeah, okay.
I guess I could do that.
Yeah, and so I knew I had this connection. They put me in touch. I went in, did like interviews and auditions, and then they started sending me out on some pretty legit
let's
auditions.
Go.
Yeah.
So now you get to the holiday party.
We get to the holiday party, and it's an open bar, and those are the two most dangerous words in the English language with my particular proclivities, because I drink in a whole different way without the regulating factor of money. Like I always say, like it's so good that I'm not rich, because I would be into so much harder shit at a so much higher level.
Yeah.
But and it was, literally it's just like wine. But this, I was nervous. I was excited. I was like so stoked by the whole concept of like the agency is giving me free wine.
That's what I'm saying. That's a big deal.
Yeah. And talking to all these people, and I ended up like bumping into Andre, who I was like a total fanboy. I was like, oh my God, you're Andre de Shields. And the last thing I remember of that party was having a pleasant conversation with him. And then I have this flash of staggering in the street. And the next thing I remember was waking up in my apartment wearing my dress shirt and tie and naked from the waist down. And,
Daffy ducked it.
Yeah. So that's the end of the first part of the story.
Okay.
Cut to 5 years later.
We're fast
Yeah.
forwarding.
So now we're in the next of my New York lives, because
Yeah.
I've had basically 3 or 4 completely different like phases of life. Phase 1 was I am king musical theater guy. Phase 2 was fuck that, I'm done with musical theater forever. I became a personal trainer, and I just
We do it.
I know.
We do it.
We do it. We're doing exercises.
That's all we're doing.
I'm making the microphone peak a little bit, but that's how you know you're doing it right.
And
Ah. Speaking of peaks,
valleys. Have you seen the indigenous people? They're behind the rocks.
yeah, and so like that sort of came about because I had been working like horrible restaurant jobs.
Yeah.
I was crying in the subway on Thanksgiving in my Planet Hollywood necktie.
That's how you know you're a New Yorker.
Hell yeah. And I was like, you know what? I need to work somewhere that I don't want to like kill myself just walking in the door.
Yeah.
Like, could I just be in a place that I don't hate?
Yeah.
And the first thing that popped in my head was the gym. I love being at the gym. So I was working some other table waiting jobs, got certified. And when I started doing that, it was, it was really cool and meaningful in a very different way.
Yeah.
And it finally got to the point where like I was going on these auditions. I actually got.
So you're still auditioning this whole time?
I was still auditioning,
Okay.
but the moment that kind of broke it for me was I got an offer to go do a Christmas Carol in Alabama.
Hell yeah. You're
Well,
damn right.
You're damn right. But it was right when I had just started working with this client who was like a 350-pound guy
Okay.
who was trying to work his way down to 250. And we had this tearful, like, I am going to be with you on this journey.
And now you're like, I'm
yeah.
out of here.
And I literally, I said to my agents, I was like, I just don't have it in me
Oh, so
to
you-
look this guy in the eye and say, I'm sorry, I can't help you. I have to go do Christmas Carol in Alabama.
Oh my God. So you paused the whole thing.
Not only that, it kind of set off a chain reaction in me. And it was kind of the first realization I had of like, I haven't been on an audition in years for a show that I actually wanted to do because I like it and want to do it. It had become so much about the win.
Yeah.
And so much about like, I'm going to make it. I have to be on Broadway to satisfy the end game of this trajectory
Yeah.
that I've been on. But I didn't particularly want to do this. I didn't.
course, yeah.
I don't think I ever really loved like the music of Rodgers and Hammerstein. It's just some shit I was real good at,
Yeah.
and I loved that I was real good at it, and the way people responded to me in that role.
Yeah.
Much like being heteronormative in general. And
that thought real
I'm holding it. Yeah.
You're at the gym and you're like, oh, I drink my during the gym stuff, my EAAs and stuff. And then you drink like 2 or 3 of those bottles. And then you get home and you're like, I don't even have to pee. And then about an hour later, you're like, my bladder's going to explode.
Yeah.
That's what just happened.
I have a very particular relationship with the concept of needing to pee.
That is true.
So not entirely. For me, it's like, no, I'm just gonna immediately when it seems like time, because if I don't, it might just happen.
It might just happen.
And that's not. It would be a fun twist to this. I think
it would definitely be one of the clips.
Yeah, no, those wounds I think have now healed enough to where if I was to just pee myself on the podcast, we could laugh about it together.
Of course.
But I'd probably
we do the old misogynistic thing. And I'd be like, "Yo, Tracy, go clean this up."
That's what the bitches are for. Oh God, I hate myself even for making that. That's too far. Now we know.
Now we know where the line is.
Now we know where my line is.
So we took a little bathroom break.
We did.
I got a cookie. You got a mint.
I did. We've all got what we need. You earned your cookie because you did legs day today.
Yes, I did.
I earned my mint because I drank coffee, and
there
everybody wins.
So you were talking about, and this I find this actually fascinating because we'll do probably one more story because we're gonna get to wedding day after this, and then we're gonna have you back on to talk about some others
for sure.
But you had mentioned that you had become uninterested in kind of the stuff you were auditioning for.
Yeah,
which is a great realization to have. Because a lot of times we get into these industries, like podcasting or comedy, or there's so many people who get into certain things. And I've had this discussion with people who do podcasts because I've had quite a few, as you can see on the wall. That's my little, what do you call it? Affirmation wall, where I'm like, I haven't done anything. I put all this stuff up to be like, oh, yes, I have done some things.
I love that. I should get me an affirmation wall.
So... But I have talked, and they're like, oh, this podcast, it's going to be so good. It's genius. And then after like 3 months, they're like, I don't even like doing this anymore. Yeah. So for you, you're going on all these auditions. You're doing the personal training. You look this client in the eye and you say, I'm here for you. And then you get this gig and you're like, I'm not doing. So what is the fallout from that?
Well, the fallout from that is I started a new chapter of my life where I think... At about 25, I kind of started the process of figuring out who I actually am and what I actually want to do.
Okay.
Because again, I think up until that point, I was chasing the validation and sort of following what felt like the path. Like, this is how it works. This is how it's supposed to work.
Mm-hmm. Almost like a checklist.
But yeah, that realization, the moment I realized, I was like... And it's a thing that they say, actually, in every form of showbiz. They're like, if you can do anything else, do it. Yeah. And I was like, oh, I could totally do something else.
Oh, okay. That's very eye-opening to have that experience.
And I literally was like, I would feel better staying here and training this guy and learning, who else I am. And musical theater in particular, I think is unique among arts cultures in how insular it is. Mm-hmm. Because like comedians, one of the things I love about the comedy community is it's all over the place. Yeah. You've got guys who've been to jail multiple times, hanging out with, the most Christian kid at Christian camp who started drinking when he was 20. Yeah. You've got guys from absolute destitution. You've got the spoiled children of rich suburban parents, but we all kind of are coming together through this shared language and this shared passion. Musical theater is mostly people who only listen to musical theater, only do musical theater, obsess about musical theater, and it kind of it really does almost become like, do you even understand the rest of the world? And it's why I joke about Hamilton all the time, which Hamilton is freaking awesome. Shout out to Lin-Manuel Miranda.
An elitist, okay.
I love Hamilton, but what's funny about it to me is it's this phenomenon.
Yeah.
Huge, dominated, though they're like, no musical has ever done what this musical has done. And fundamentally, it's because it's a musical that actually sounds like music people listen to.
Yes. That's a great point.
And literally any time that happens, it's a fucking sensation. It's a mega hit. Yeah. But it speaks to how rarely musicals intersect with like anything anybody outside of musical theater gives a shit about.
When they did the Michael Jackson musical, they were like, this is bananas. It broke all these records. And it's like, yeah, because it's music people listen to all the time.
What if we actually were like, what do people who don't have degrees in musical theater like?
Yeah.
It's like...
Because I'll be honest, I have seen plays. I went to see Phantom of the Opera back at the Times the big theater thing in Jacksonville, whatever the newspaper is, they had a theater. And so it was a big deal. It was like a big production of the Phantom of the Opera. And I'm not going to lie to you, even though you did musical theater, I'm going to be very honest with you, Paul. I couldn't follow the story. And I was getting so frustrated because it almost seemed like the tone distorted the whole story. Like, literally the technical tone. Like, they wanted the music to be so loud that you couldn't really understand anything they were saying. And I was like, I can't follow this.
Yeah.
And it kind of turned me off because I was like, the music is obviously good, but at the same time, I was like, I don't know what the fuck is going on.
Yeah. Well,
and I was very turned off by it.
No, for sure. And I still have a lot of love for musical theater and theater in general. And I'm not one of those people who's going to say every musical needs to be for the masses. If you want to make, a very academic and, musically intellectual show that is just for people who have the same technical theory background that you have and want to geek out about all the modulating minor sixths or whatever that you're throwing in there. But at the same time, to the extent to which it has kind of failed to evolve, and for me, the extent to which the culture of theater seems to be so embittered about why aren't people coming to Broadway shows?
Yeah.
Why do people put their money into sports instead of theater? Why do people want to go see rock shows and comedy shows instead of coming to theater? One, because they're cheaper.
Yeah.
Two, because these things connect with people. They're built, this is not, comedy shows are not just for people who study comedy.
Yeah.
And I do think that, I don't know, there's an extent to which that is a departure from the origins of theater.
Yeah.
I have kind of an artistic soapbox that I think the closest thing that we have in media culture to the classical Greek theater is the WWE.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. I completely agree. There's heroes, there's villains,
there's heroes.
tragedies.
The stories are over the top.
Yep.
It's conducted in an arena setting. It's you've got people wasted, holding up signs, participating, shouting, engaging with the story that's happening. And yeah, Greek tragedies would typically have the violence off stage, but there was other forms of spectacle, physical spectacle, dances, people coming out and slapping each other with big old fake dicks.
That's a great point. I never even put two and two together. That's a great point.
And theater has kind of shifted to become more of this is for the wealthy.
Highbrow,
This is for people, all this stuff of Broadway divas, scolding people for making noise at the wrong time, for laughing too loud, it's the thing that makes this accessible and enjoyable for people who are not in it for the academic experience is participating, is invite people to come and have a drink if that's what they're into, but to be loose and let this be fun and celebratory and collaborative.
Because you're trying to invoke emotion, you're trying to invoke a human response.
Yeah.
And so to chastise people for having that response at the wrong time or too loudly is definitely a turnoff. It definitely would be well, fuck this.
Yeah, and that's not to say you can't put on, Chekhov.
Yeah.
But just don't get butthurt about it if a guy who most of his media consumption is football, WWE, and Taylor Swift concerts isn't going to get it.
Yeah.
Isn't going to want to sit in the dark and watch tragedy unfold silently.
It's so, I love how you put that, isn't going to, don't get mad at the person who isn't going to get it. Because for my comedy, a lot of times, especially my darker stuff, there are people in the audience who just won't get it. And there are times where you get off the stage and you're kind of like, man, I don't know if that crowd, I very rarely will say that crowd sucked. A lot of times I'll be like, I don't think that crowd got me.
Yeah, that was not my crowd.
Yeah, and there is a substantial disconnect, or excuse me, there's a substantial valley in between those two things, whether they suck or I don't think they got it. There's the people who are entitled and who are like, oh, everyone, this is funny, fuck them, they suck, or who will go and say, because Tracy's pointed this out and she hates it, and I'm very much with her. When she comes to shows, she'll say, I don't like how aggressive some of the comics get with the audience if a joke bombs.
It's one of my pet peeves.
Yeah, it's
comedy.
take responsibility. They didn't get it. That's not on them. That's on us.
And it's funny. I was watching a set where Brian McFadden, you see, great, one of the best consistent comics that I've seen live multiple times. And, one of the things he navigates really well is being able to walk that line where, if something falls flat, he will give the audience playful shit about it, but in a way where you can tell he's not bothered.
Yeah.
And the difference is so palpable when the comic is bothered.
That's the point. Yeah, because if I say a joke and it bombs, I will make a quip about how I misread the situation or I misread the room. Like, I'll come after myself, or I will playfully be like, "Oh, I guess you guys had great childhoods."
Yeah, no, fuck you guys. Whether,
yeah,
you know,
it's
like,
not that whole like aggro, like you guys fucking suck. It's like, all right, dude, maybe we should look in the mirror. And it's a very similar point to like what you're saying about musical theater, where it's like, yeah, they just might not fucking get it.
Yeah, they might
It's
not get
okay.
it. Move on. Do we have time for a quick tangential story
Yes,
here?
go ahead.
So my parents just saw me do comedy for the first time.
You
And
said in a basement.
Yeah, in a basement, Broadway Comedy Club specifically.
Love Broadway.
And I loved it. It was a pretty solid lineup, and Drew was nice enough to kind of sneak me onto the bill at the last minute because I was like, my parents are going to be in town. I'm trying to get on a show so they can see me do my thing. There was a mix-up with the communication. They weren't sure if I was actually even going to be able to come on. So, you know, right before I went on, they were like, okay, you're going on now. Right before this had happened, the comic before me, I had deliberately told my parents to, like, sit towards the back because I knew they weren't necessarily going to want to, like, engage with crowd work. This woman found them and, like, went in for a solid, like, 3.5, 4 minutes that just got more and more uncomfortable and just kept doubling down and kept like coming after the audience aggressively for not laughing. And I was like, damn, man, like, abandon ship already.
Yeah.
Like,
As a sailor, I can tell you.
Can we just let everybody off the hook already? Like,
I can't. And I've been in the room before. And the thing that bothers me about it is that stand-up comedy is niche. As big and mainstream as people think it is now, it's still a niche thing. Mm-hmm. So if you go to a comedy, like I've been in the back of the room at the stand, just like hanging out watching the show, because I'm still obsessed with comedy as much as I was when I was 12 when I first found it. Mm-hmm. So I've been in the back of the room and I've seen like something happen and a comic go in on an audience member to the point where they've made them cry. And I go, oh, them, their family, and anyone that they talk to will never go see live stand-up again.
Yeah.
Ever again, because of what you just did. Because you had to make your fucking point. And if some of the people in the audiences were like, yeah, fuck them, then I understand like that almost like animalistic instinct to be like, yeah, they were making too much noise. It's like, we work at nightclubs. People are drunk. Like, it's one thing to go at them because they were making too, like, yeah, absolutely go after a heckler. But to keep, like you said, 3 or 4 minutes of just like, I'm going to make you want to die.
Well, and when nobody in the audience is with you, and the thing that made me think of it was that, again, the aggro toward the audience, like, you guys don't get it, and rah, 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 and I understand where it comes from.
Yeah, I felt it.
Yeah, it's this need to, like, I've got to get a laugh out of this, and it becomes, are you familiar with sunk cost fallacy?
Yo, yeah.
Damn right. Like, I've already made it this weird. There's got to be a laugh at the end. It's like, there might not be.
Yep.
It might just
and then
be more weird.
Super awkward. I want to get back, because we were talking about how you got out of musical theater, and then the Wiz story, there was a second part to it. So
exactly.
How does that all tie together?
I'm in this new chapter where I'm working as a personal trainer, and I'm just doing recreational rock music for my artistic fix. And that eventually led to the career phase I'm in now, where commercial music is my main livelihood.
Yeah.
So this was when I was working as a personal trainer, and I started working at a new gym, and I signed a new client who was none other than Broadway legend, Tony Award winner, Andre DeShields.
That's awesome.
It was full circle. And he is an amazing, one of the more just amazing human beings I've ever had the pleasure to work with. Like, you can't have an interaction with this man that's not just like infused with the awareness that he is just on a different plane from the rest of us, even down to the, like, handing him a dumbbell, like, hand me this microphone. Like, that level of theatricality in every there's just.
So he's a Tony Award winner, baby.
Yeah. So when we first started up, I was, making small talk. I was like, hey, we've actually met before. You may not remember this because this was years and years ago. But at the agency Christmas party this one year, I got pretty drunk. I don't know if you'd even remember. And he looks at me and he goes, "Oh, honey, everyone remembered you."
No. Oh, no. Say
So I was like, oh, so I was the only person who did not remember my behavior at this party.
Oh my
That's
God.
awesome.
So he remembered exactly who you were.
I don't know if he actually did or if he just recognized how perfect an answer that would be.
That was so perfect.
Oh my God, yeah. But no, I think it's entirely possible that I made a bit of an ass of myself that day. But, we since recovered and, shout out to Andre DeShields.
Shout out.
Very, very sweet man. We worked together for the better part of 2 years.
Did your original client lose the 100 pounds?
He did.
Fucking.
Yeah.
You did that. Or you helped
No,
with that.
he very much did that. And that was a big mantra for me as a trainer is it's like, we can't do the work for you.
That's true. You're 100% right.
And he was one of the most consistent, dedicated, hardworking clients I ever had.
Damn, look at you.
Him and Andre both actually did the freaking work.
Got to do the work.
You got to do the work. So yeah, the payoff of
5 years later,
everyone remembered you. And I carry that with me now.
Every single day?
Into every open bar situation I find myself in.
Oh, God. Well, let's talk about it. The wedding.
Yeah, the wedding. So this is more like this is at the intersection of the good and the bad and has more to do with the people in my orbit and just kind of how drugs and partying can make things magical and also scary and bananas and also just it's a fun kind of story for a podcast. Yeah. So the day that I got married, we had this. So my wife and I are queer polyamorists who deliberately left the whole God stuff out of our wedding.
Yeah.
But we also had like a lot of our conservative family there.
Yeah.
We also had like our weird poly hippie party friends. So it was just this fascinating mix of people.
It would be very odd for 12-year-old Paul to see getting married Paul.
Bruh. 12-year-old Paul didn't think I was going to have sex before marriage. 12-year-old Paul,
as you put it, the most Christian guy at Christian camp.
No part of who I am now would make a damn lick of sense to who I was at 12. But I think if who I was at 12 had actually had the cultural exposure that I have now, and that's the thing that I think about a lot. If Ted Lasso had been on TV when I was a kid, if I had seen Oberyn Martell from Game of Thrones being like the sexiest badass ever put on film while also being just joyously pansexual about the whole thing, I think things probably would have turned out differently for me. I might have,
true.
Because I would have had some sort of context for this being A, real, and B, not something that will either send me to hell or make everybody hate me.
Yeah. Well, and it is an interesting thing because being an alcoholic and with some of the stories that I have, a lot of times people's first, if you could go back to, because I didn't drink till I was 18, like 17, 18. People are always like, if you could go back to your 16-year-old self and would you tell him not to drink? It's like, no. I wouldn't have all of the experiences that I've had, good and bad. I wouldn't have the value for life that I have now after almost dying. Like, you know what I mean? Like, all these things that have happened have put me right here now recording a podcast with you in New York. So it's like, no, I don't think I would have. I don't you know what I mean, though? Because it's like, if 16-year-old me could see the 36-year-old me, he'd probably be like, I thought we weren't drinking, man. Like, I thought we were doing the thing. And it's like, yeah, but then I would have ended up probably getting married young, having a family, doing a job that I hated, knowing that I've always loved comedy but never got the chance to do it. And it's like, no, like, I'm glad all of the things happened between now and then.
Yeah.
Even though some of them were pretty shitty. But like but it's to your point. Like the 12-year-old you isn't obviously the same person that's sitting in front of me.
Well, and he wouldn't have been able to conceive of this person.
But I just thought it was so succinct how you were just like my conservative family and then my hippie friends, and I'm like, oh yeah, you had that conservative background.
Oh yeah, and I still like a lot of my in-laws are very Trump Republican Catholics. And
I love your in-laws, Paul. There's one thing I can say: it's your in-laws are the greatest. They understand.
Do you know how much I wish I could do a passable Trump impression?
A lot of people say it's the best. It's huge. It's huge in Florida. I get standing ovations for this.
You do have a real good Trump.
Thank you.
I'm
I
not
appreciate
gonna lie.
that.
You give great Trump.
You have great Trump vibes.
Thanks. Solid Trump vibes. I could probably work up a JD Vance. It seems more up my more to my skill
Just
set.
that creepy, like the muskrat eyes.
Yeah. So we've got this weird motley assortment of our
Where
people
is the
here.
wedding?
It was on a beautiful farm in North
I
Carolina.
knew you were gonna say outside.
Yep. Oh, abso-fucking-lutely.
You give outdoor wedding vibes.
100%. Although it was a collaborative decision between me and the missus because we both knew she's the reason it was on a farm.
Okay.
You know, and well, no, actually, you know, look, there's a whole story of how we came to settle on this farm, which tragically I think has been really wrecked by.
And
it's sad because
hurricanes.
It's
Thoughts and prayers.
Yeah, and you know, just shared feelings of heartbreak, which I think is at the core of the thoughts and prayers thing anyway.
Yeah, there was someone on stage at the mic on Wednesday, and they were making fun of Florida, and then the room got really quiet, and I think because a lot of the comics in the room were my friends, and she paused and she goes, "What, do you guys have family in Florida or something?" And I just looked up, and I wasn't going to say anything, and then I just took a beat, and I went, "Yeah, my whole family."
I think I was there.
You
for
were
this.
there. You were in the
I think I
pack.
was in the room. Yeah, and I was like,
And she was like, oh, and I was like, "Yeah, man, like."
No, I get it.
Yeah.
I feel like the thing I'm always least ready for on stage is getting hit with like a legit moment of humanity.
Yeah.
You know,
Well, because it's like after the fact, and like once all the just give it a second. Like, I don't know if my family's making it out of this one. And obviously, as Floridians, we don't take hurricanes as seriously as probably we should because we go through so many. I've been through I think I did the math, 76 hurricanes in my life so far.
Yeah.
So it's like I don't my whole family stayed, and obviously that's a thing. But it's also this could be really bad. So maybe before you make that's what fucking Florida gets joke, maybe we wait until next week, see what happens.
Yeah, and you know, I get where that comes from, but I do, you know, it's the fine line of comedy of like wanting to skewer, you know, those in need of a skewering, but when you lose the empathy at the heart and soul of the thing,
You've lost all of it.
Yeah. That's you know, it's Anthony Jeselnik did a podcast where he was talking about quoting Aristotle or somebody, I don't even, but about, you know, art is getting away with it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a thing that I think about a lot in the culture of, oh, you know, cancel culture's out of control, comedians can't say anything anymore. It's like, no, you can still say stuff.
Yeah.
It's the outrage at people not laughing when you cross that line.
If it was a good joke, I'd have been all for it.
Yeah.
But she literally was just like, yeah, fuck Florida. They're getting hit with another hurricane. That's what they deserve. And I was like, that's not a bit.
Yeah,
That's not a joke.
That's just really mean to the people of
It's just
Florida.
not nice.
It's the difference between comedy and bullying.
Yes.
Is it funny? Like,
That's the only.
I mean,
the only parameter here is it
Yeah.
has to be funny. And
Yeah.
I'm sorry, it wasn't funny.
yeah, not if your roast is not funny, it's just bullying.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly. So you're at the farm.
So we're at the farm. We've got all these people, including I have a friend named Samia, who is also, she's a very, you know, outspoken, queer, sex positive writer, podcaster, voiceover artist, singer, you know, my kind of crazy people.
Yeah.
She brought this guy, Caesar, who was so overpoweringly hot that I know for a fact that my wife scoped him as she was walking down the aisle, and I wasn't even mad about it. Like, I get it. He's like 7.5 feet tall or something ridiculous.
yeah.
Black, chiseled, immaculate. I'm just introducing the cast of characters right now. It's all going to come together.
I see what you're doing.
Also there was our friend who is a very eccentric creature of music and theater and comedy, and, you know, definitely one of my party friends. And I added that there's a bonus story that goes along with this, and which I'll tell later. So as we're in the middle of the reception, my father-in-law gets up to give this really beautiful speech, just, you know, from the heart.
So the wedding itself, the ceremony goes well.
The ceremony goes beautifully. Okay. We were by a river, listening to the song River, played by an acoustic trio of like some of my best music friends, and just, you know, it really was magical in all the ways we wanted it to be magical. And we get to the reception, and as my father-in-law is getting into like the halfway point of his speech, my buddy passes the fuck out, like goes down, like just bam. And we were all just like, what? Oh no. And so immediately we had this like, oh God, what do we do? Is there a doctor in the house? And this fucking guy, Caesar, gets up and is like, don't worry, I'm an army medic.
Of course he is.
Because of course.
Of course you are.
Because of course. Ugh. Some people are just so annoyingly hot. You can't help but just be mad. And so he comes to the rescue. everything eventually worked itself out. He was fine. We chalked it up to just the heat and some dehydration. And then later, we're talking to try to get to the bottom of what had happened. And he was like, oh, yeah, no, he actually took a bunch of mushrooms provided by none other than Caesar.
Caesar himself.
The hero became the villain. But then
In true Caesar fashion,
I know. It's like, I come to bury Caesar, not to praise him. That quote has no relevance, but I just wanted to say something Shakespeare-y about Caesar. Or so we thought. So I went from spending several months thinking of him as the hero to spending another year and a half thinking he was actually the secret villain of the story, to then like a week ago sitting down with another one of our kinky poly friends who was at the wedding. This is a guy that my wife used to hook up with, who is still a very dear friend of the family. And he revealed that it was he who had provided the mushrooms the whole time.
Son of a bitch.
So it turns out Caesar was indeed the hero all along, which honestly makes me more resentful of him because it became so much more palatable when I had something legit to hate him for.
But he was just a hero.
He was just a tall, perfect hero of a man. What are you going to do?
Shout out Caesar.
Shout out to Caesar, you beautiful bastard, you. Thanks for saving the day. And all this to say that like that was kind of the downside of the wedding day, but there was also a lot of really party mode at its best moments, up to and including when one of my groomsmen came up to me at the after party and was like, I have a special wedding gift for you and the missus, and dropped a half a tab of ecstasy. And I'm not going to lie, it was pretty freaking great.
It's pretty fun.
I'm not going to lie, it was pretty awesome rolling a little bit at the afters.
You gotta love it, right?
Yeah. And so, and it was a poignant reminder that it's like, there is, there's a place for the responsible use of, I guess we'll call them party sprinkles.
Yeah,
the additions.
100%. I say it all the time. Like if you can do that stuff, and you can, like you said, you can be moderate about it and responsible about it, my hat's off to you. My problem is, even if I get a prescription for Adderall, within like 2 pills, I'm like, let's crush this up and snort it. That says just take twice a day. It doesn't say how to take it.
Yeah. And it does say how much to take, but does it really
Does
matter?
it really?
Like,
I remember a light bulb. I was changing my sister's car headlight, and I was like, I don't know, 19. I just didn't know what I was doing. And I remember the light bulb exploded in my face. And it was one of those small ones. So the glass is like super thin, and like shards of glass got in my eye. Had to go to the emergency room. Luckily, I was wearing a contact, so it like shielded my eye. I go to the emergency room. They give me painkillers. But because it's your eye, it's one of the most sensitive parts of your body. So they don't give me like, perks or anything like that. They give me Oxycontin, not oxycodone, Oxycontin, the real stuff. And they only give me 5 pills. I took the first one, and I was like, I'm in so much pain. And then the pain went away, and it's all warm and cuddly. And then I was like, this is great. About an hour later, I take a second one, and I'm like, this is awesome. I ran out of those pills within, I was supposed to take like one every 8 hours. I ran out of them in the first night. And I was like, oh yeah,
no.
I'm not a responsible any kind of taker of anything. Like, I'm bad at even my vitamins I take now. It says take like 1 a day. I take like 2 in the morning and 2 at night because I'm like, well, more is better. That's how it works. And then my pee is like neon green, and I'm like, this can't be right.
Oh my
man.
God.
Moderation. That is the through line for this whole episode.
Honestly, moderation and, the recognition that you don't have to make the one thing your whole thing.
Yes. That's a good point.
Yeah.
If we've learned anything from Paul Saylor, it's you could have 5 different lives.
Yeah. And they can all be interesting and wonderful and valid, and, maybe keep your pants on sometimes.
Don't duck it.
So you don't have to rely on the kindness of strangers to make sure you get home safely.
Dude, this was so much fun. Plug everything one more time.
I'm Paul Saylor. I do stand-up comedy. I do music. You can follow me at 2tallpaul on Instagram if you want. You don't have to. I'd like it. I will feel super loved and appreciated if you do. I drive.
Dude, we have to have you back on because we still have Slutty Career, the Platinum Lounge,
God.
the Undie Run. We still have a lot to talk about. So
We
you're gonna
have
come
stuff
back
to
on.
talk about. We'll come back. We'll bond.
Yes.
We'll talk about the Iliad.
We'll
We'll
bro
talk Star
down.
Wars. I love broing down with you. This has been a blast. This is like, yes. explosions, sound effects. Let's fucking go.
Thank you, everybody, so much for listening. At Brennan T Comedy on all social media, BrennanTComedy.com. Check out the one-man show, Ex-Drinking Buddy, Comics Look at Life, Near-Death Recovery, and Redemption. And November 20th, we will be at Grove 34 for Brennan and the Broken Toys, putting together a little show. That'll be fun. So check it out. Get your tickets. Talk to you soon.
Boom.